The Christmas Selfie Contest by Rosie Greening and Claire Fennell. In a big, busy workshop with shelves full of toys, the elves worked their socks off and made lots of noise. They hammered and clattered and chattered and played and worked as a team on the toys that they made. But Alfie was different from all of the rest. He didn't like teamwork. He liked being best. He'd boast about all the toys he'd create, then show them off to everyone shouting, "I'm great!" One morning, the elves were so sick of his talk, the head elf said, "Alfie, please go for a walk." So Alfie went out to the gingerbread store and noticed a poster he'd not seen before. It said, "Santa is holding a selfie contest, so send in your photos and he'll pick the best." Young Alfie was certain he'd win it with ease. "I'll take the best selfie. It sounds like a breeze." He told all his friends, but they just got annoyed. "There's no time for selfies. We need to make toys." Young Alfie ignored them in all of their fears. He wanted to try out some selfie ideas. He ran to the polar bears, chilling outside. "Please pose for a selfie," he eagerly cried. The bears made a tower and Alfie yelled, "Cheese!" But one of the polar bears just had to sneeze. Achoo! So Alfie rushed off to a whale in the sea. He said, "Will you pose for a selfie with me?" But as Alfie's camera went off with a flash, the whale spurted water on him with a splash. Then, as it grew darker, two owls fluttered past. "Will you take a selfie with me?" Alfie asked. The group had a hoot, but it still wouldn't do. The sky was too dark, and the selfies were too. Poor Alfie ran back to the workshop in tears. "I thought I would win, but I'm out of ideas." "Forget about selfies," the other elves said. "Let's finish these toys with some teamwork instead." The elves got to work, and at last Alfie saw. When they worked as a team, they could do so much more. They sanded and painted with painstaking care, and soon there were colorful toys everywhere. "The workshop looks magical," young Alfie said, and then an idea popped into his head. "Let's pose for a selfie," he said with a grin. With all of us in it, this selfie could win. He set off the selfie, and to his surprise, he got a reply saying, "You've won first prize. Your prize is a sleigh ride with Santa himself. Congrats on your selfie, you're one lucky elf." Young Alfie was thrilled, and he knew what to do. He showed all his friends and said, "You should come too." When Santa arrived in his beautiful sleigh, the elves clambered in. Then they went on their way. And as Santa's reindeer soared into the skies, young Alfie was glad they had all shared his prize. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. The Great Reindeer Rebellion, written by Lisa Trumbauer, illustrated by Janny Ho. 'Twas the week before Christmas, and somewhere up north, dear Santa was frantic. He paced back and forth. He had just heard some news that he sure didn't like. It seemed that the reindeer were going on strike. Yes, Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, even Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen. They said, "We are finished. We've had quite enough of pulling your sleigh with such big, heavy stuff. We're striking, dear Santa. And until things get better, no pulling or flying, we're in this together." So, Santa decided, "That's fine, be that way. I'm sure I'll find others who will pull my sleigh." He wrote up a want ad for lands far and near. Please come and help Santa, or no Christmas this year. Soon creatures came running and leaping and clopping, hopping and flying, and creeping and romping. So many to choose from. Which one should I pick? I'll show those old reindeer they can't stop St. Nick. Let's start with the pooches. Yes, dogs would be best. Then he hooked them all up, and he gave them a test. To the top of my wall, to the top of my roof. And the dogs started scrambling and barking, woof woof. They're flying! I knew it, St. Nick began yelling. But then those 8 dogs started sniffing and smelling. There's food, the dogs whimpered. Yes, food! Come this way! And the dogs scampered off, forgetting the sleigh. I won't be discouraged. Come on, cats, it's showtime. The cats trotted over and were harnessed in no time. Go! Fly! Santa hollered. To the top of that hill, so the cats all dashed forward, and they'd be running still. If not for the stray mouse that ran in their way, they shook off the harness. No flying today. No pooches, no felines. What am I to do? How about some true flyers? Called Santa. Yoo-hoo! Flamingos! He summoned. It's your turn. Let's go. And I must say, your pink looks divine in the snow. They soared up to the roof where they gracefully perched. You've got it, said Santa. But they started to lurch. On one leg they wobbled and hobbled and slipped up. They soon lost their balance. Oh, how they tipped up. Just then came 8 hopefuls, hopping along. I think we can help, and we're all very strong. Yes, yes, welcomed Santa. I think you will do. Then he harnessed them up, those 8 red kangaroos. That's it, declared Santa. You're hired. Let's go. But the hoppers soon struggled. They started to slow. They stopped, then they stumbled. They looked quite ashamed, for their pouches were loaded. This weight was to blame. We took all your presents, the Red Roos said sadly. We're sorry, dear Santa, for behaving so badly. And then Santa heard it, a trumpeting sound, as 8 marching elephants shook up the cold ground. Good fellow, we'll help you. We're sturdy and steady. So he harnessed them up, and the great beasts were ready. They stomped, then they took off. Nick said, you can do it. They sailed to the rooftop. And then they fell right through it. You're too heavy, griped Santa as he helped them to stand. Isn't anyone out there who can give me a hand? No sniffers, no chasers, no animal grouches, no one-legged birds, and no creatures with pouches. Well, who should come over but the reindeer? How strange! We'll help you, dear Santa, but a few things must change. A whirlpool and sauna would make us quite able, and real beds, not brass, and a heater, and cable. You will have it, and more. That's a promise, a fact. Then the reindeer and Santa signed a lifelong contract. And that's how it happens that near Christmas Day, you'll always see Santa, and pulling his sleigh are 8 trusty reindeer who love being in flight. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. The Gingerbread Pirates by Kristen Kladstrup, illustrated by Matt Tavares. It was Christmas Eve, and Jim and his mother were making gingerbread men. Let's make a pirate crew, said Jim, and so they did. The captain had a gingerbread cutlass and a peg leg made from a toothpick. Jim loved him best of all. You'd better leave some pirates out for Santa Claus to eat, said his mother. Not Captain Cookie, said Jim. At bedtime, Jim took the captain to his room. I wish you had a ship, he whispered as he climbed into bed. Then he lay awake, listening for reindeer hooves on the roof. Captain Cookie seemed to be listening too. Jim fell asleep, but Captain Cookie went on listening. Where's my crew? He wondered. And who's this Santa Claus who wants to eat them? When the house was quiet, he swished his cutlass through the air. He tested his peg leg. Tap, step, tap, step, tap, step. He climbed down into darkness. Then he ran. Step, tap, step, tap, step, tap. He ran until he came to a cliff. He dropped his cutlass over it, then frowned. He found his cutlass and then another cliff. So he did it all again, one cliff after another, until he reached the bottom. Then Captain Cookie had a shock. A mouse was nibbling on his cutlass. Why, it's half gone, cried the captain. He grabbed the cutlass and slashed at the air. Oh, it's ruined, he moaned, and off he went. Stomp, tap, stomp, tap, stomp, tap. Merry Christmas, called the mouse. Christmas? What's that? Thought the captain. Then he turned a corner and saw something that astonished him. A huge tree with stars in its branches. Ahoy there, called a voice. Looking up, Captain Cookie saw two pirates climbing down toward him. My crew, he thought. The two men, Wavy and Dots by name, dropped to the ground. They jumped right up, but the captain saw that Dots had broken his hand. No cutlass? And now a wounded man? He thought. Just then, there was a thump and a scrape. A black cloud puffed toward them. Run! Shouted the captain. They ran until they had to stop for breath. Who is that? Asked Dots. Must be that cannibal Santa Claus, said Captain Cookie. We've got to get out here before he eats us. Where's the rest of the crew? Up on the cliff, I think, said Wavy. Start climbing, men, said the captain. Up they went. They're in jail, cried Dots when they reached the top. Save us, cried the pirates. Wavy and Dots kicked at the prison walls. They tried in vain to move the roof. What about a rope and a pulley from the ship, said Wavy. What about the ship's cannon, said Dots. There is no ship, said the captain. Then he noticed a strange look on Wavy's face, and he whirled around. What he saw made him wish for his cutlass. A gigantic man was leaning over them. Young Jim always leaves cookies for me, he said, but the plate was empty, so I came in here. Look out, boys, ordered the captain. The big man lifted the prison roof and peered in. Don't you eat my crew, shouted the captain, raising his fists. The big man blinked. This is your crew, he said. Yes, said the captain. And who are you? I am Santa Claus, and I swear by my sleigh I won't eat your men. Sleigh? What's that? Some kind of ship? That's right. Swears by his ship can't be all bad, thought the captain. Still, he was suspicious. What are you doing here, he asked. Why, it's Christmas. Christmas? Said Captain Cookie. I wish somebody would tell me what this is. Santa Claus laughed. Follow me, he said. I'll show you a bit of Christmas. Back beside the starlit tree, the pirates watched as Santa Claus reached into an enormous bag. What have you got there? The captain began. It's a ship! Wavy shouted, and the next thing Captain Cookie knew, his men were swarming its decks and rigging. There's cannons and cutlasses! Cried Dots. The sky glittered with stars. The captain rubbed his eyes. Real pirates, he thought, and a real ship. He turned to look back. Merry Christmas, he called, but Santa was already gone. On Christmas morning, Jim's mother found an empty plate on the mantel. It looks like Santa Claus found the gingerbread man, she said. But Jim was admiring his presents. His favorite was the pirate ship and its pirate crew. The captain had a cutlass and a peg leg, and Jim loved him best of all. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. How the Grinch Stole Christmas by Dr. Seuss. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot. But the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why. No one quite knows the reason. It could be his head wasn't screwed on just right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think that the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve, hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm-lighted windows below in their town. For he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, It's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers nervously drumming, I must find a way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew. All the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys and then, oh, the noise, 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 noise. That's one thing he hated, the noise, noise, noise. Then the Who's, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beast, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. And then, they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Who's would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas sing, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years, I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then, he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat, and he chuckled and clucked, what a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeer are scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No, the Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max. Then he took some red thread and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, yeah! And the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Who's lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark. Quiet snow filled the air. All the Who's were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, this is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed. And he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch. But if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck, only once, for a moment or two. Then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who's stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk with a smile most unpleasant around the whole room, and he took every present. Pop guns and bicycles, roller skates, drums, checkerboards, tricycles, popcorn, and plums. And he stuffed them in bags. Then the Grinch very nimbly stuffed all the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox. He took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding. He took the roast beast. He cleaned out that icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. And the Grinch grabbed the tree, and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound, like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast, and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why? But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. Why, my sweet little tot, the fake Santa Claus lied. There's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here. And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. And when Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On their walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire. And the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's houses, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 15:15 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze when he packed up his sled, packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsel, the trimmings, the trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh-pooh to the Who's! He was the Grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up. I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two. Then the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. That's a noise, grinned the Grinch, that I simply must hear. So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then it started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, the sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or other, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet, ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without tags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Thomas and Friends, Santa's Little Engine. Based on the Railway series by the Reverend W. Awdry. Illustrated by Tom Lapadula. Christmas on the island of Sodor. Plow, Thomas, plow. It is time for the Christmas fair. Who will play Santa? Sir Topham Hat. Santa needs a sled. Workers hammer. Painters paint. Winston does not look like a sled. Thomas picks up a real sled. Uh-oh, ice. Thomas goes slow. Beep, beep. The sled is safe. Where is Santa? Ho, ho, ho. Santa is ready. Thomas backs up. Watch out, Thomas! Oh no, he bumps the sled. Thomas will save Santa. Hurry, Thomas! Look out for branches! Beep, beep! Ho, ho, ho! Thomas pulls Santa's sled. Merry Christmas! Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Not Very Merry Pout Pout Fish by Deborah Dyson. Pictures by Dan Hanna. In a festive ocean corner, fish were decking out the reef, hanging tinsel, bows, and lights in a holiday motif. Voices laughed, voices sang. What a merry time of year! Yet a certain gloomy fish wasn't feeling any cheer. Mr. Fish, with his list, wore a Yuletide pout. I need presents for my friends, but my time is running out. For a gift should be big and a gift should be bright, and a gift should be perfect, guaranteed to bring delight. And a gift should have meaning, plus a bit of bling zing, so I'll shop till I drop for each just right thing. At the first store he reached, Mr. Fish's eyes grew wide. The shelves were full of baubles. How could any fish decide? Shiny trinkets, handy gadgets, choices more and more galore. And yet, nothing seemed quite right. Guess I'll try the shop next door. For a gift should be big, and a gift should be bright, and a gift should be perfect, guaranteed to bring delight. And a gift should have meaning, plus a bit of bling zing, so I'll shop till I drop for each just right thing. In a tizzy-busy crowd, shoppers everywhere beside him, Mr. Fish spied a banner for the season's hottest item. He hustle-bustled over, but they just sold out. Mr. Fish's hopes wobbled in a bout of doubt. For a gift should be big, and a gift should be bright, and a gift should be perfect, guaranteed to bring delight. And a gift should have meaning, plus a bit of bling zing, so I'll shop till I drop for each just right thing. He reached the final store and was very first in line, but his shopping plans were dashed. "We're closed," said the sign. There were no stores left. There was no place to go. Mr. Fish had nothing, not a single gift to show. Oh, a gift should be big, and a gift should be bright, and a gift should be perfect, guaranteed to bring delight. And a gift should have meaning, plus a bit of bling zing. But I've shopped till I've blocked, and I don't have a thing. Mr. Fish's face sank in a crestfallen frown. I'll have to miss the party. I've let all my friends down. Then a gentle voice jingled, "Mr. Fish, not true. All you really need to bring is the one and only you. If you want to give some presents, it is not too late to start, for the best gifts of all come straight from the heart." With the help of Miss Shimmer, sharing laughter, fun, and grins, Mr. Fish made gifts with his very own fins. Later at the party, Mr. Fish passed them out, and he felt very merry. This is what today's about. For his gifts were big, and his gifts were bright, and his gifts were perfect, and they all brought delight. And his gifts had meaning, plus a bit of bling zing, and his each and every friend loved their just right thing. All were happy, all were laughing, all were talking, all were singing, all were sharing in the season and the goodwill it was bringing. Mr. Fish joined his friends, and he felt his heart lift. They had peace, joy, and love. What a very merry gift. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Thomas and Friends, the 12 Engines of Christmas. Sing along with Thomas and his friends. On the first day of Christmas, what did Thomas see? A big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the second day of Christmas, what did Edward see? 2 smiling snowmen and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the third day of Christmas, what did Henry see? 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the fourth day of Christmas, what did Gordon see? 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the fifth day of Christmas, what did James see? 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the sixth day of Christmas, what did Percy see? 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the seventh day of Christmas, what did Toby see? 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the 8th day of Christmas, what did Emily see? 8 yummy fruitcakes, 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the 9th day of Christmas, what did Hero see? 9 candy canes, 8 yummy fruitcakes, 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the 10th day of Christmas, what did Rosie see? 10 tree decorations, 9 candy canes, 8 yummy fruitcakes, 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the 11th day of Christmas, what did Diesel see? 11 lacy snowflakes, 10 tree decorations, 9 candy canes, 8 yummy fruitcakes, 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. On the 12th day of Christmas, what did Spencer see? 12 twinkling lights, 11 lacy snowflakes, 10 tree decorations, 9 candy canes, 8 yummy fruitcakes, 7 small surprises, 6 flickering candles, 5 holly wreaths, 4 pretty presents, 3 carol singers, 2 smiling snowmen, and a big green star-topped Christmas tree. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Bear Stays Up for Christmas by Karma Wilson and Jane Chapman. The day before Christmas, snuggled on his floor, Bear sleeps soundly with a great big snore. Dear Bear, get up! Mouse shouts in his ear. We won't let you sleep through Christmas this year. His friends are all there, gathered in his lair, and Bear wakes up. He stands with a stretch and a great big sigh. I hope I can make it. I do want to try. Don't worry, squeaks Mouse. Hare says, it's all right. We'll keep you busy all day and all night. He tries to lie down, but his friends all frown, so the bear stays up. Come on, says Badger. Time to follow me. In Pine Grove Glen, there's a fine Christmas tree. So they stomp through the woods and they tromp down the track. They hoist up the tree onto Bear's big back. He plods very slow as they trudge through the snow, but the bear stays up. Back at the cave, Gopher brews mint tea, and Mole pops corn to string upon the tree. Raven and Wren bake a fresh fruit cake. The friends do their best to keep Bear awake. His shoulders start to stoop, and his eyelids droop, but the bear stays up. They hang up their stockings by warm firelight, and hum Christmas songs like Oh Holy Night. They cuddle and sing as they wait for the sun. But soon all the voices fade to just one. A bright star glows, while his good friends doze, but the bear stays up. Bear giggles and grins. He works and he raps. He bustles and bakes while everyone naps. He piles up presents under the tree. But who's at the doorway? Bear doesn't see. He toils all night until the sun rises, making his friends their Christmas surprises. Just before dawn, he lets out a yawn, but he still stays up. When Christmas arrives, so lovely and white. Bear's friends awake to a glorious sight. Presents and goodies are piled up tall. I stayed up, says Bear, just to share with you all. As his friends shout with glee, Bear lies by the tree, but he still stays up. Wren flies to the stockings and tweets out a cheer. Besides our bear's presents, Santa was here. When all gifts are opened, there's one last surprise. Badger shows Bear a quilt just his size. Bear snuggles up tight and mutters, "Good night." Then Bear falls asleep. His friends tidy up and slip from the lair. They whisper, "Sweet dreams. Merry Christmas, dear Bear." Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Anti-Claus by Elise Primavera. The Kringle family lived high atop the luxurious Bing Cherry Hotel in New York City, and they loved Christmas. They kept a Christmas tree up all year round. Mr. Kringle was president of the renowned Jingle Bell Bell Company. Mrs. Kringle owned the fabulous Mistletoe to Nail Salon over on 56th and 5th. They had even named their young son after you-know-who. Sophie and her little brother had everything. But if you asked, was it enough? No, they would say. Was it enough to have their own private soda fountain? No, they would shake their heads back and forth. Or clothes and books galore? No, 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 they would scream. It had been suggested by their great-aunt, Auntie Claus, that maybe Sophie and her little brother were given too many presents. You can never have too many presents, sniffed Sophie. That's my motto. Yes, everyone in the Kringle family loved Christmas. But no one loved it more than Auntie Claus. Auntie Claus lived at the Bing as well, penthouse 25C. Every afternoon, Sophie was summoned there for tea. Each day, Auntie Claus would instruct Sophie on a different topic. One day, it might be Christmas trees. Always pick a nice full one, darling, with springy needles. Another day, decorating. You must drape the garland. Darling, one strand at a time. You must never throw it on. After they finished tea, Auntie Claus would close with these words of wisdom. And darling, always remember my first and final rule. Whether it's birthdays, Christmas, or Halloween, it is far better to give than it is to receive. Sophie wondered about her great-aunt a lot. She's so mysterioso, Sophie thought. And this was true. There were many strange goings-on up in penthouse 25C. Most people considered Auntie Claus just another eccentric New Yorker, but Sophie knew that there was more to her than met the eye. For instance, what was the diamond key that always hung from a silver ribbon around her neck? Just a bit of costume jewelry, darling, her great-aunt would say, then quickly change the subject. Why did Auntie Claus leave every year right after Halloween and not return until Valentine's Day? Just a business trip, darling. And she'd change the subject again. Where does she go? Sophie wanted to know. Once again, it was Halloween and Auntie Claus announced, "In 1 week, I'm off on my annual business trip." What kind of business are you in anyway? Sophie had asked. That, darling, is something for me to know and you to find out. Auntie Claus had said with a twinkle in her eye. And that was exactly what Sophie intended to do. This year, I have a plan. I'll stow away. Sophie had made up her mind. As she was leaving, Sophie said, "I'm going on a business trip with Auntie Claus." "Marvelous, darling. Be home in time for Christmas. There's a good girl," said her mother. "Do take your mittens," said her father. "I'm going too," said her little brother. "Oh, no, you're not," said Sophie. "Can if I want to," he said. "Cannot," she said. "Can't you?" he cried. "Cannot," she yelled. Whee! Sophie could hear his ear-splitting scream start to fade as she ran out the door. Sophie tiptoed into Auntie Claus's apartment. There were many boxes and trunks waiting to go. Choosing the largest, Sophie pushed aside the capes and furs and wriggled inside. Quietly, she made a little peephole in the cardboard so she could see everything that was going on. Auntie Claus entered the room. She removed the diamond key that hung from the ribbon around her neck. Next, she placed the key into the lock of her old elevator. The door slid open. The boxes and trunks were loaded. The door slid shut. Vroom! The elevator shot up in the air and out into space. They were going up, up, up. Minutes, an hour passed, and still they were going up. Sophie could feel it getting colder and colder. From her peephole, she could see stars zipping by. Or was that snow? We can't possibly be in New York any longer, she thought. The elevator landed with a thunk, tipping over Sophie's box. She could no longer see, but she thought she heard cheers. The sound soon faded until all became completely silent. Thinking it safe, she climbed out of the box. Where am I? Sophie whispered. You must be the new elf, a little man said. That's it, said Sophie. I'm the new elf. Who are you? I'm Mr. Pudding, he said. Oh dear, you're in violation of elf rule number 3. What do you mean? Asked Sophie indignantly. He pulled a worn green and red book from his pocket. On the cover it read, Elf Rules and Vital Information. He pointed to the section marked Dress Code. Sophie read out loud. Always look neat, always look snappy. A well-dressed elf always feels happy. Follow me, he said, and trotted off into the darkness. Where are we going? Shouted Sophie. Hurry, hurry, Mr. Pudding called over his shoulder. Only 48 days left. Mr. Pudding put Sophie right to work in the mailroom. It seemed to her as good a place as any to begin her search. Where was Auntie Claus? And what was she doing here? For days, Sophie lived among the elves and did her best to blend in. She slept on a cot in the elf dormitory. She ate her meals in the cafeteria. No one suspected. Every day, Mr. Pudding appeared. Hello, Elf Sophie. Settling in? He asked. The uniform is itchy. The hours are long, said Sophie. This is hard work. Oh dear, said Mr. Pudding. He pulled the old green and red book from his pocket. Elf rule number 2, Mr. Pudding recited. An elf's work is never done, but hard work never hurt anyone. Rules schmeals, thought Sophie. For weeks, Sophie looked high and low for Auntie Claus. But now it was almost Christmas Eve, and she had turned up nothing. Sophie was worried. If she didn't find Auntie Claus, how would she get home? If she didn't get home, how will I get all my Christmas presents? She thought. Just then, Mr. Pudding appeared. Hello, Elf Sophie, he said. Good news. You have excelled in the mailroom and may proceed to package wrapping. After that, we'll all pitch in on sleigh packing. I'm not going to package wrapping, and I'm not going to sleigh packing. I want to go home, Sophie yelled. I have to get all my... But before she could finish, Santa's voice interrupted over the PA system. It's that time of year again, his voice boomed, and I was hoping one of you would volunteer to go to the coal mines and pick up the BB&G list. Sophie whispered to Mr. Pudding. What's the BB&G list? BB&G, he shivered, is short for bad boys and girls. Any boy or girl on that list goes without presents or worse for Christmas. Sophie swallowed hard. Uh-oh, she thought. Mr. Pudding continued. Only the bravest elf would volunteer for such an awful job. Yes, a brave elf, thought Sophie, or else a girl who thinks she might be on that list. She raised her hand high. I'll go, she said. Oh dear, Mr. Pudding said. As Sophie made her way toward the coal mines, she could hear the chanting of the BB and girl elves. Spoiled brats and crybabies, wine babies, and all the ones who don't believe. Here's some coal and here's some gunk. Fill a stocking that smells like a skunk. Sophie went down, 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 where it became darker and darker. Finally, she reached the very bottom. There was the list. Sophie looked for her name. But it wasn't her name she saw on the list. It was, my own little brat of a brother, she cried. Chris is on the bad boys and girls list? Well, she thought, once she'd gotten past the shock of it, they do kind of have a point. But then she pictured the two of them on Christmas morning. There would be lots of presents for her, and nothing for her little brother. On his favorite day of the year, Chris would find only a stinky stocking filled with coal and gunk. He will be so disappointed. He will be so sad, Sophie said. She quickly erased his name, but now there was a large telltale gap. There was only one thing to do. Sophie took a deep breath and wrote down her own name instead. The ink wasn't even dry on the page when some kind of really strong magic happened. Right before her eyes, the list, the BB&G elves, and the coal mines vanished. And Sophie was whirling around and around, hurling through the air in a blur of Christmas red and green. Was she up? Was she down? Sophie was standing on the stage in the grand ballroom. A clock struck midnight. Santa began to speak. She's always on time. She works harder than anyone I know, including me. Ho, ho, ho. In short, she does things right, and I would be lost without her. Let's have a big round of applause for my sister. The curtain opened. Auntie Claus! Sophie shouted. Auntie Claus! Everybody cheered. Hooray for Auntie Claus! Turning to Sophie, Auntie Claus winked and said, Come along, darling. You must be home in time for Christmas. Sophie was about to climb onto the sleigh when Mr. Pudding appeared. He was waving the green and red book in the air. Oh dear, he cried. Auntie Claus, Sophie can't leave until she knows the first and final rule. See? It says so right here under departing procedures. The reindeer stomped restlessly and shook their heads as if to say, Let's go, let's go. Sophie knows the first and final rule, Mr. Pudding, Auntie Claus said. I do? Said Sophie. Yes, you do. Now hop onto the sleigh. There's a good girl. Sophie jumped onto the sleigh, and it rose up into the sky. Goodbye, goodbye, she called. She could barely hear her aunt's voice over the wind and the snow. I knew you had it in you. Merry Christmas, darling. The sleigh picked up speed. Ho, ho, ho. Santa laughed as the stars whizzed by. Sophie closed her eyes, her face stung with the cold. When Sophie opened her eyes, she could hardly believe she was in her own bed again. She ran down the stairs toward the living room. Please let him get his presents, she whispered to herself. Under the tree was her little brother. His cheeks were red, his eyes sparkled, his belly shook with laughter. Merry Christmas, Sophie, he bellowed. Merry Christmas, Chris, Sophie said with great relief. It was then that she realized Auntie Claus is right. I do know the first and final rule. She said to herself, it is far better to give than it is to receive. There is something here for you, her mother and father said proudly. They handed Sophie a tiny box with a card. Inside was a diamond key hanging from a red ribbon. It's from Auntie Claus, Sophie said. Where is Auntie Claus anyway? Chris piped up. On a business trip, darling, Sophie said, and smiled mysteriously. Suddenly, a thought occurred to Chris. She's never here on Christmas, he said. What kind of business is she in anyway? That is something for me to know and you to find out, Sophie said to her little butterball of a brother. And someday he would. But that's another story. For my dear niece, Sophie, you really are a chip off the old block. Love, Auntie Claus. P.S. I'll be expecting you for tea on Valentine's Day, darling. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe. Thomas and Friends, Christmas in Wellsworth. Based on the railway series by the Reverend W. Audrey, illustrated by Richard Courtney. It was 2 days before Christmas. Everywhere Thomas looked, Wellsworth was bustling with preparations. Toby brought shoppers into town. James pulled freight cars full of decorations. And Henry had just delivered a large Christmas tree to the town square. The following night, Wellsworth would have a wonderful Christmas Eve festival. Everyone would gather to watch the lighting of the tree. They'd sing carols and ring bells. Thomas couldn't wait. If only it would snow, he thought. Then everything would be perfect. I'm afraid we won't have a white Christmas this year," Thomas peeped as he looked up at the blue sky. "That's okay with me," said Henry. "I have so much to do. I don't need a snowstorm now." Thomas loved the snow, even if he had to wear his heavy snowplow. Snow would make the Christmas Eve festival so pretty. Just then, Sir Topham Hatt called to Thomas. "I have a message from Lady Hat," he said. "She wants to come to the festival, but my car is in the garage for maintenance. I need you to run over to Kelsthorpe to pick her up. Please take Annie and Clarabelle so you can bring my grandchildren as well." "Yes, sir," peeped Thomas. Of all the jobs on Sodor, pulling a trainload of children was his favorite. Thomas was soon speeding across Sodor. Everywhere he looked, people were smiling and waving. In Marin, children prepared for a Christmas pageant with real sheep. And as night fell, the festive lights of Rolf's castle shined brightly. The town looked like a magic palace. Thomas arrived in Kelsthorpe. He had made good time and was eager to make the return trip the next day. When Thomas awoke the next morning, the weather had changed. It was cloudy and damp and getting colder by the hour. A chilly fog rolled over the town. Soon, Lady Hat and the children arrived at the station. They climbed aboard Annie and Clarabelle, dressed in their holiday best and carrying boxes of gifts. They couldn't wait to get to Wellsworth and the festival. The fog grew thicker. Thomas chugged away slowly. The cold wind blew and the tracks were wet and slippery. Thomas's lamp was useless in the fog, and his driver held the throttle tight. They crept along more and more slowly. "This isn't very merry weather at all," Thomas peeped. As he rolled past Rolf's castle, Thomas couldn't see the town through the thick fog. He wanted to get to Wellsworth as soon as possible. Thomas knew they had to be careful and go slowly. He hoped they would pass through this bad weather soon. But the bad weather didn't lift, and as it grew later and later, darkness soon added to Thomas's problems. As he climbed toward Kildane, Thomas knew he wouldn't be in Wellsworth in time for the festival. He would miss the tree lighting, and worst of all, he was sure he had ruined Christmas for Sir Topham Hatt and his family. Meanwhile, the people of Wellsworth gathered around the tree in the town square. They lit the festive lights and sang carols, but Sir Topham Hatt was not with them. Sir Topham Hatt waited nervously at the Wellsworth station. There were reports of fog and frost all over the countryside. He checked his watch and worried. "I hope everyone is okay," he whispered to himself. Finally, as Thomas chugged over the hills outside Wellsworth, the fog lifted. He could see candles flickering in the windows of homes he passed. The streets of Wellsworth were empty, and even the sight of the great glowing Christmas tree at the center of town didn't cheer Thomas. When they reached the station, Sir Topham Hatt hugged his wife and helped carry the sleeping children off Annie and Clarabelle. "And now, we must get these children to bed," said Lady Hat, "or Santa Claus will never arrive." Thomas chugged back to the yard, feeling very low indeed. The next morning, the yard was blanketed with beautiful snow. All the engines wished each other Happy Christmas. "I'm sorry I missed the festival," Thomas peeped to James. "And worst of all, I think I ruined Sir Topham Hatt's holiday." Thomas didn't know that Sir Topham Hatt was standing nearby. "Ruined?" said Sir Topham Hatt. "You brought my family to me safe and sound. That's the best gift of all. Taking your time in that terrible weather was the right thing to do. Thomas, I'm glad you're such a really careful engine." Thomas was delighted. "I am so grateful for my railway," Sir Topham Hatt announced. "I'm giving each of you a hopper full of the best coal to thank you for a wonderful year." All the engines tooted happily. "And Thomas, at the request of my wife, Annie and Clarabelle will be getting new seat cushions." "It's a wonderful Christmas after all," peeped Thomas. And the snow did make everything perfect. James said tomorrow would be perfect. "Tomorrow? What's tomorrow?" Thomas asked. James laughed. "Have you forgotten Boxing Day, Slow Coach?" "Hooray! I had forgotten," Thomas peeped. "More rides for children!" Every year, on the day after Christmas, All the engines on Sir Topham Hatt's railway roll out to the hospitals all over the island. Free rides and new toys and clothing are given to every child. Boxing Day was beautiful. Thomas, James, and Henry were decorated and loaded with nice things for the children of Sodor. Then they chugged across the countryside. Everywhere the engines went, they were met with cheering. All the children loved their presents and taking rides around the towns to see the lights and decorations. Thomas couldn't have been happier. "James," he called, "what's nicer than a white Christmas?" "What?" asked James. "A white Boxing Day," laughed Thomas. Thanks for watching. Click subscribe.